Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers in their Week 10 matchup played November 15th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis. And starting off on the first possession of this game, the Packers would score on a 44-yard field goal by Mason Crosby that made it 3-0 Green Bay over Detroit. And they would not score for the next 9 possessions, which would be punts, discluding the knee they took before halftime at the end of the first half. But in the second quarter, the Lions would get on the scoreboard in this low-scoring defensive battle with just 12 seconds before halftime. Matt Prater hit a 49-yard field goal that tied this game up at 3 apiece. So it's tied 3-3 at halftime. Then to start off the second half, the opening kickoff of the second half, Ameer Abdullah ran it back all the way to the 1-yard line, 104 yards. And then the Lions got pushed back to the 4. But on 3rd and goal from the 2, Matt Stafford hit Brandon Pettigrew for a 2-yard touchdown pass. But the extra point was no good. And so it would be 9-3 with the Lions in the lead by 6. Then at the end of the third quarter, Stafford would be intercepted by Clinton Dix, but the Packers would go 3 and out, and they weren't able to turn that turnover into points. The Lions then would get the ball, and they would end up with a field goal as Matt Prater hit a 51-yard field goal less than 2 minutes into the fourth quarter, and it was now 12-3 with the Lions extending their lead to 9 points. Then with about 6 minutes left to play in regulation, Aaron Rodgers hit Richard Rodgers for a 4-yard touchdown pass. Crosby added the extra point, and it was now a 2-point game. Detroit 12, Green Bay 10. So it's the first time that the Packers got in the end zone, and this was with 6 minutes left, as after they had scored on their first possession with that field goal, they had punted on every other possession until this scoring drive. So then after the touchdown by Green Bay, the Lions then drove down the field, and they would answer with a touchdown of their own as Matthew Stafford threw his second touchdown of the game. This one a 4-yard touchdown pass to Lance Moore, and now it would be 18-10. So the Lions get the touchdown, and again, they do not get the extra point. Again, it's wide left as Prater missed the second extra point of this game. So this was with about less than 2 minutes left in the game. And then the Packers would drive down the field real quick in a minute and a half, going 73 yards in just 8 plays. And Aaron Rodgers hit Justin Perillo for an 11-yard touchdown pass. They went for 2. They did not get the 2-point conversion. And so it remained a 2-point lead for Detroit with the score 18-16. So 18-16. With just 30 seconds left to play in this game after the failed 2-point conversion. He tried to hit Davante Adams but did not connect. And so now, with just very little time, the Packers were forced to go for the onside kick, and they recovered. So Randall ends up recovering at the onside kick, and now the Packers still had a chance with just 31 seconds left. A couple incomplete passes would bring up 3rd and 10. Rodgers then hit Davante Adams for a 12-yard pass. He got out of bounds. Actually, no, that was in the middle of the field. Rodgers spiked the ball then. And then on 2nd and 10, he hit Adams for 3 yards. He went out of bounds. And now that would set up for a 52-yard field goal attempt by Mason Crosby for the win on the final play of the game. And it's no good. It's blocked. And this game comes to a close. What a crazy finish. And the Lions had lost 24 straight games in Lambeau Field, and it would not be 25 as they win this one, their first road win of the season, the Packers' first loss of the season at home, and it's their 3rd straight loss in a row. They started off 6-0, they're now 6-3, having lost to Denver and Carolina, 2 undefeated teams at the time. But now they lose to the Lions, who had only had 1 win. This is their 2nd win. They're now 2-7 on the season. So 18-16, a crazy finish in this game. A crazy game, very low-scoring game. This very well may be a game that saves Jim Caldwell's job as the head coach of Detroit, getting this big win in Green Bay. Yeah, and heard a lot of talk about him being on the hot seat, but you had to figure he had to be with how bad the Lions have been playing. They already got rid of their general manager, the president, their offensive coordinator. They're just firing people left and right. And somehow he kept his job, and I guess this is why. Because you see the Lions rally around him to get this big win in a season that this is pretty much their Super Bowl right here. Because their season 2-7, it's not like they're making the playoffs or anything, but they got a big win against their NFC North division rival. And the Packers, you got to be scratching your head about after this one. I mean, it was one thing to lose to Denver and to lose to Carolina on the road, but to lose at home to the Lions, a team that they've been dominating for the last 12 years in Lambeau Field, even when the Lions had, some bright spots, some, decent seasons, not too many of them, but even when they were good, they couldn't beat the Packers in Lambeau Field. But now this Lions team that has been playing pretty porously somehow comes up with this upset. Like I said, a low-scoring defensive battle. And in this game, Aaron Rodgers, this is part of why I think they really, lost the game, is they had him throw it 61 times. And you throw the ball 61 times, and you only run the ball, 16 times. Yeah, I think maybe you might lose. That's the thing, is that, Eddie Lacy's just disappeared this season. Thought he was going to have a good season. He hasn't really been getting it done. He's got some injury issues he's dealing with, but Starks took over the starting job. Didn't really do much. They didn't really give him a heavy load to carry either. And, but like I say, Aaron Rodgers, 35 for 61, 333 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford, 24 for 38, 42 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And on the ground for the Lions, they really weren't getting it done on the ground either, but they kept running the ball despite not really getting much production, even though it's not much balance on their side either. But Joey Bell, 14 carries for 17 yards, was their leading rusher. Ameer Abdullah had 5 carries for 15 yards. They also gave 3 carries to Riddick. He only gained a yard. And for Green Bay, James Starks, 15 carries for 42 yards. Rodgers also had 2 carries for 8 yards. And then we look at the receivers. And the game's leading receiver, Megatron Calvin Johnson, 6 receptions for 81 yards. Golden Tate, 4 receptions for 52 yards. And Lance Moore, 3 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown. And then for the Packers, Devontae Adams had 10 receptions for 79 yards, and Justin Perillo had 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. And this thing, the injuries are really getting to the Packers on that offensive side. They're really just not getting it done. Look at the kickers. Crosby, 1 for 2 on the field goals. Of course, that missed field goal was the game-winning attempt for 52 yards. It's a long attempt, and he was blocked. So, I mean, you can't really, it's not his fault necessarily. But he 1 for 1 on the extra points. And for the Lions, Prater was 2 for 2 on the field goals, 0 for 2 on the extra points. Of course, with his 2 missed extra points, if he had made those, then it wouldn't even have been a matter of a field goal could win it. They would have been up by 4, and the Packers would have been forced to go for a touchdown. But due to those missed extra points, the game was within reach there at the end. We look at the defense. Clinton Dix had a pretty good game, 9 tackles and an interception. And for the Lions, Whitehead had a sack, Jones had a sack, and Reed had a sack. Glover Quinn forced a fumble. We look at the first downs, team stats here. 22 first downs for the Packers, 16 first downs for the Lions. Then we look at third downs, 9 for 19 for Green Bay, 47% converted. 5 for 16 for the Lions, just 31% converted. They went for it once on 4th down, and they did convert. Then we look at total net yards, 372 for the Packers, 287 for the Lions. On the ground, the Packers netted just 47 yards, the Lions just 45, as neither team was dedicated to the run. And on their average yards per play, just 2.6 for the Pack, 1.7 for the Lions on the ground. So they really could not get the job done on the ground. Of course, the defense just shutting down the run. We look at the yards netted through the air, 325 for Green Bay, 242 for Detroit. Stafford was not sacked at all. Aaron Rodgers was sacked, of course, 3 times, losing 8 yards. We look at the penalties, 5 penalties against the Packers, 55 penalty yards, 3 penalties against the Lions, 35 penalty yards. Both teams had a fumble, but they did not lose their fumble. And we look at the red zone. Both teams were 2 for 2 in the red zone. Both teams 100% in the red zone. And then we look at the time of possession, 30 minutes, 40 seconds for Detroit, 29 minutes, 20 seconds for Green Bay. This is pretty close statistically speaking, and it was a close game. It came down to the wire, just a 2-point win for Detroit, but it was a much bigger win for the Lions. Like I said, that win right there just may have saved Jim Caldwell's job as the head coach of Detroit, as the Lions have been vastly underperforming all season, and they didn't really put up big numbers. It's just a matter, to me, I feel that Green Bay just not getting it going on the ground. Detroit wasn't really going on the ground either, but the Packers just, you asked Rodgers, put it all on his shoulders. Aaron Rodgers is good, but you got to have a balanced attack. And, they just did not get it done. And the defense on both sides was just shutting it down. It was a heck of a defensive battle in this one. Like I said, the Packers, they scored on that first, opening possession of the game, and then they punted on the next 9 possessions until they scored with just 6 minutes left. Now, the thing is something that I've noticed, too, is it seems that at times they can fall into that, trend of, it's for whatever reason, the offense doesn't seem to be going until it's, go time, fourth quarter, it's crunch time, it's clutch time. And then now, all of a sudden, boom, they start moving it, and they put up the 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but of course, falling short on that 2-point conversion that they needed to tie it to send it to overtime. And they do get the big play with the onside kick, but even still, they weren't able to get that field goal. I mean, they were right there, and a 52-yard field goal is within range. Crosby can hit those, but he got it blocked. And also, you look at that opening kickoff of the second half, that really made a big difference as well. That was where, the Lions, they set up that first possession of the second half with the ball already goal to go. So they were in the red zone to start off. They're on the 1-yard line. They lost a couple, they gained a couple back, and then they got in the end zone, and they got that touchdown. And even with the missed extra point, that really set them up in a position, that put them ahead, and they got the other field goal, and then they go up by 9, 12-3, in the fourth, and it was just too deep of a hole for the Packers to climb out of in this low-scoring defensive battle where they're grinding out. And that's the thing, too, is that when these two teams get together, it usually is a hard-fought game. Even when the Packers, they've been dominating them for the last, 12 years, they just are actually going back even further, pretty much this whole century. In Lambeau Field, they just keep beating them, but it's always, not always, but it's been at least recently pretty close games because they're in the division, and whenever you go against a division rival, it always is going to be a hard-fought, close game because they're so familiar with each other regardless. But here the Lions, they come out with the win. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great weekend and enjoyed all the sports.